All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started, everyone. Welcome to the Plan Unit H presentation. My name is Dory Dalton. I'm the Wildland Specialist and Firefighter for Genesee Fire Protection District. I've also been a community member here in the foundation for the last 10 years. This evening, you're going to hear from Brian Mallett, the Open Space Manager, Becky Smith, and Chris Garlasco of Genesee Fire and Safety Committee. This presentation is recorded and will be posted for later viewing on the Genesee Fire Rescue and Genesee Foundation websites. We've set aside an hour and a half for this meeting. You'll be muted during the presentation. As questions come up for you, please put them in the chat box, and the chat box will be monitored and we'll answer your questions at the end of the presentation. All right. Okay, again, thank you for being here. And it is lagging. Oh, there we go. All right, so what is a community wildfire protection plan? So our district's plan, it was updated from our 2008 report. This was an 18-month project completed in April of 2021 in partnership with the Forest Stewards Guild. It is a tool for Genesee Fire Rescue, land managers, residents, and HOAs to help us prioritize projects to make the district safer and more prepared for wildfire emergencies. Please remember, it's a snapshot in time. The project included data collected by driving all the roads and a general on-the-ground assessment of risk factors. So we modeled potential wildfire behavior under the 60th, 90th, and 97th percentile fire weather conditions. And these are conditions that occurred in the district about 40%, 10%, and 3% of the days between June and October, which was the period most often associated with large fires in Colorado from 2009 to 2019. Our weather parameters came from the data collected at the Lookout Mountain Remote Automatic Weather Station and fuel moisture conditions from Fire Family Plus. When we talk about red flag day warnings, that means the fire weather conditions are present and include warm temperatures, very low humidity, and stronger winds. And they're expected to combine to produce an increased fire or risk of fire danger. The higher the percentage, the higher the fire danger. The 97th percentile fire weather conditions modeled in the CWPP would qualify for a red flag warning and are similar to conditions that occurred during the Elephant Butte fire in July of 2020 in the southwest of the district. Genesee Fire Protection District experienced 5 red flag warnings in 2019 and 16 red flag warnings in 2020. And during the 2021 season, there were 3 red flag warning days in November and 4 in December. During that time, there were multiple wildfires, including the most destructive wildfire in Colorado history on December 30th. The conditions used for the 90th percentile fire weather scenarios would constitute a red flag warning day only if widespread thunderstorms were predicted for the area with a possibility of lightning. Conditions used for 60th percentile weather scenarios have higher fuel moistures and lower wind speeds. As you look at this screen, you can see the different addresses that are located in Foundation or the H plan unit. And if you look at the map, it is this purple piece that's outlined in dark black, and it's on the eastern edge right here of the district. Okay, so our plan units were created along HOA boundaries and property boundaries with considerations of roadways and topographical features. All right, so wildfire threatens our home in 3 ways. The first being radiant heat. And radiant heat is energy that's transferred through the air onto other objects when materials burn. If a house receives enough radiant heat for a sufficient time, it will ignite without flames contacting it. Sometimes radiant heat can break the glass and windows, allowing wind-blown embers to enter the house. Even if the radiant exposure isn't large enough or long enough to result in ignition, it can preheat surfaces, making them more vulnerable to ignition from exposure to flames and embers. Even vegetation and other fuels located away from the house can pose a threat. Ember showers. Embers are the most common cause of home ignition. They're light enough to be blown through the air and can result in the rapid spread of wildfire by spotting, in which embers are blown ahead of the main fire, starting other fires. And finally, direct flame contact. This is when fire reaches your home through tree crowns or along the surface of the ground directly to your home. All right. So on the screen, you see a slide talking about hazard ratings. Again, you can see your plan unit outlined in dark black. I'm going to talk about the 4 variables, but first I need everyone to understand that the entire district is 95% more likely to have a wildfire as compared to the rest of the United States. And this puts us at an extreme hazard rating, and the ratings of the different plan units are relative to one another. And again, they're based on 4 variables. And the first variable I'm going to talk to you about is right here, and it's fire risk. And you can see that right here, it's red, which puts your plan unit in the high risk category. And this is based on fire behavior. And that's going to be the wind, the temperatures, and low humidity, the topography in your plan unit, the location, and the fuels in your plan unit. The next variable would be suppression challenges. And again, based on the fire behavior and challenges that could arise getting equipment to the area to fight fire. It's important to keep your roadside vegetation cleared. The optimal driveway and roadside clearance is 13.5 feet high by 20 feet wide. And these are based on Jefferson County recommendation and Genesee Fire Rescue apparatus size. And you can see that the ratings for your plan unit are rated low. Then we move down to the third variable, which would be evacuation hazards. Okay. Again, based on fire behavior, the location, the visibility during the fire, the width of the road, and the type of evacuation notice that we have. Is it the entire community evacuating or just part? Are residents exiting while resources are entering the area? And there's two-way traffic. And you can see based on this, you are rated at a high hazard rating. And then we move over to home ignition zone hazards, and that's right here. And those things are going to include the materials, your roof, siding, and then how your defensible space is. And remember, defensible space is that 100-foot circle around your home or 150 foot if you have a slope on your property. And defensible space is the buffer you create between your home and the grass, trees, shrubs, and any wildland area that surrounds it. And this is the space that's needed to slow or stop the spread of wildfire, and it helps protect your home from catching fire either from embers, direct flame contact, or radiant heat. Proper defensible space also provides firefighters a safe area to work in to defend your home. We, the firefighters, have to have space around your house to make a stand to prevent fire from reaching your house. Think about your house. Would we, the firefighters, be able to defend your house without putting our lives at risk? We would like to see fire on the ground in mitigated areas when we have a chance to stop the fire and not allow the fire to go from tree to tree because trees are too close and dense or have ladder fuels under them. We cannot fight fires in trees. And you can see based on the color of your this variable, it is moderate. When you combine the variables, you'll see right here, your overall rating is considered moderate. All right. So on this slide, these are just some bullet points pulled from the CWPP from findings for your risks. It says most homes are on flat terrain, but they're built with a mixture of fire-resistant and flammable materials. There's a deep ravine west of Montane Drive East that poses a risk for an active crown fire. There is defensible space work around some homes, but there's plenty of grass. Most private drives do have adequate turnaround for our firefighting equipment, but growth along the roadways decrease our access. About 70% of the unit is at risk of passive or crown fire activity. 20% of the homes are at risk of extreme exposure to radiant heat and spotting, and approximately 5% of roads, private drives, and driveways have potentially non-survivable conditions, and those would be under the 90th percentile fire weather conditions. Okay. On this slide, you can see on the left, again, your plan unit is outlined in blue, and this is the flame links that were modeled in the CWPP. Okay. The modeling is based on fire weather conditions at the 90th percentile. And you can see the majority of your plan unit is this light peach color. Okay. This lets us know that the fire will most likely be able to be controlled with a hand line under these conditions modeled. But down here, you've got some areas of red, which shows that equipment may be needed if the flame links become 4 feet or greater. And we could have some significant control issues right there. So we would need to bring in equipment. On the right, this has to do with crown fire. Again, This is the conditions modeled under the 90th percentile fire weather conditions. And you can see that your orange and yellow here, okay? Under these conditions modeled, it shows the opportunity for surface fire and passive crown fire. And again, if you look right here, surface fire is this. This shows you that the fire is mainly on the ground and burning in these surface fuels. And the passive crown fire just shows that as it burns along the ground and finds ladder fuels, it does have the potential to go up into the trees. Okay. And remember that Genesee Fire Rescue will fight the fire until the fire behavior makes it unsafe for us to do so. All right. On this screen on the left, you can see a Waldo Canyon neighborhood that was destroyed by embers. You can see homes that are standing, and then you can see some that are destroyed. You can see the trees around it. They're not all ruined, you know, they're not destroyed. There's some that have been singed by the fire, but a lot of them are still remaining. And then on the right, you can see the photograph of the neighborhood in Superior that was destroyed by embers and radiant heat. All right, so on this slide, this is a property that made it through the Cold Springs fire, and this was due to mitigation that this home had undergone. They did a lot of work in their 5 to 30 feet, breaking up that continuity of fuels. You can see that there is space between those trees, that they don't lead up from the fire directly to the home on any of the buildings. And so they were able to survive. So I just want you to know there are steps we as homeowners and community members can take to help lower the risk. And in many cases, the neighbors' risks as well. And how we do this is on this slide. So I'm going to talk with you about canopy spacing and helping minimize flame lengths. All of these things are based on the Colorado State Forestry Service guidelines and science. So the recommended spacing between tree crowns is 10 feet, okay? And that's the most outer reaching portion of the trees. It's not from trunk to trunk, it's out here. Okay, if you have trees on steeper ground, then the spacing should be further. Then we talk about limbing our trees. And again, it's the outside, the most outer edge of the trees, not at the trunk. We want to limb our trees up at least 6 to 10 feet from the ground, or a third the total height of the tree, whichever is less. Okay. All right. This shows you removing ladder fuels on the left. A lot of our trees look like this. We have trees that the branches go down, in many cases touching the ground, and there's things growing underneath. We'd like to see you clean those things out and limb those trees up to the recommended height. And then here we are on the right, talking about zone 2, out from your house, 5 to 30 feet or 5 to 45 feet if you're on a slope. This is where we help to decrease the intensity of the fire, give it an opportunity to drop to the ground. We break up that continuity of fuel, and the recommendation is to mow to 4 inches. So on this page, whoops, this is actually H. I didn't save it, so sorry. This is showing you again, you're outlined in black right here. Okay, and these are your home exposure risks, and these would be things that are influenced by overlapping home ignition zones. Maybe your ignition zone and your neighbors overlap. A potential exposure to short and long range spotting of embers. A potential exposure to radiant heat. The top graphic shows under the 90th percentile fire weather conditions, and you can see that close to a third of the homes are at a high exposure risk in these conditions. Okay. And then you pop down to 97th percentile fire weather conditions, and that bumps up to almost 2/3 of the homes are extreme risk of these exposures that we talked about on the left here. Okay. All right. So some things you can do, right? You can create a 5-foot perimeter around your home with no vegetation. So that's like xeriscaping, right? It's from the very edge of your house out, even around your decks. You can see this red outline. This represents that 0 to 5. Okay. You can remove those pine needles from your roof and your gutters, and sometimes that's a 2 or 3 time a year job. You can remove flammable materials from beneath your decks. Don't store things under there. And on top of your deck, right? When we have red flag or you're not home or on vacation, take those cushions and those umbrellas in. Don't leave them out there. Remember, 80 to 90% of our homes and businesses in the WUI, they ignite because of embers rather than radiant heat. When you consider replacing the materials for your home, use fire-resistant exterior materials. And the code has changed. And anytime you have to get a permit for the outside of anything you replace on your home, you have to use fire-resistant materials. So, and a lot of people say, well, where do we start? You know, they want to start cutting down their trees. You don't have to do that. Do those cleanup things first. This is your home, right? Start with that 0 to 5. Clean out those needles, get those things, you know, away from your house. That's the most important thing you can do to start. All right. So here we have some slides of some different areas from this plan unit, okay? In this, we've darkened some of the houses, so to, you know, identity, all that stuff. So here, this is a vent, and these are vents here, okay? Vents are really important for reducing ember spread, all right? So research has found 1/8-inch metal mesh screens are effective in preventing large ember intrusion. It still allows for airflow. So anytime, you know, if you have a gable vent, you have your soffit vents, wall vents, replace those screens. Most of us have 3/16 of an inch screen mesh in our vents because the codes weren't updated, but now it's 1/8 inch, okay? Your closed systems, like your water heating systems, your radon, your heaters, you know, obviously it's closed, so it's okay. Your wall vents, you wanna make sure that the flaps closed. When they're not in use, those flaps should be closed. And if they're not, then they need to be replaced. Find your laundry vent. You wouldn't believe how many homes I go to, people don't know where their laundry vent is. Find your laundry vent, make sure that flap closes. Make sure it's clean. It's a real easy place for lint to gather. You want to keep an eye on that, right? And take away those critter cages so lint doesn't get trapped in that. There are a lot of different types of laundry vents out that will pop up and pop down, so you don't have to worry about the critter guards, but you definitely want to find them. We want to stop those embers from getting in our homes. Fireplaces, make sure your spark arresters, again, have the proper mesh. And if you're not using your fireplace, you need to keep those doors closed on your fireplace, your screens closed. If you evacuate or you don't use it in the summer, keep your dampers closed as well, okay? This top photo, the reason it's there is because of these timbers, right? A lot of us have these timbers in our yards because that's how we used to you do landscaping. So the reason I have them there is if they're connected to your home, they're a part of your home, right? If you put a match to a timber, it's not going to ignite, but if it's old and we have these spaces, the embers have the opportunity to embed in there and just smolder, right? Like that log on the fireplace, and then it leads directly to your home. So the mitigation for that is to remove them if they're within 5 feet of your home. And if you're like, no way, that's too expensive, that's understandable. So the fix for that is to mitigate 5 feet around them, just like you would the edge of your home with no vegetation. Okay, again, we don't want to have the fire to be able to directly touch anything that's going to touch your home. Okay, all right. So on this page, there is a lot of fuel continuity on these pictures, okay? As I look at this, you know, think about where are we gonna stand as firefighters to help put fire out, right? You know, there's a lot of trees here that don't have healthy space to grow. A lot of trees over driveways, okay? So, you know, think about your opportunity to leave, your neighbor's opportunity to leave in an emergency, and for us to come in. If there's this raging fire over the road, you can't get out and we can't get in, and that puts everyone's lives in danger. So just take a look at the trees that surround your house. Do they have a healthy space to grow? Right? Okay, so on this slide, these two pictures right here, these are just entryways, right? You can see the pretty pots full of stuff, and up here, there's all kinds of stuff on the porch as well. Well, above it, that's called an overhang, and that's probably where you have a soffit. And I just want to remind you that things that burn under these overhangs, they can create radiant heat that gets trapped against your wood soffit that increases the likelihood of your soffit igniting. So the mitigation recommendation is to keep that area clean of combustibles. And I know that's tough for some of us, but there is metal decor out there. There is metal yard art. There are less flammable mats. There's actually a brand of mat that's Class A rated. If you want it, email me and I'll give it to you. Don't put these fine fuels in there. Put really dense, low-growing, pretty green flowers for the summertime. All that stuff, it's right up against your house. So this middle picture was a really good example of ladder fuels. Here you have, lots of needle debris on the ground. We have this long grass, direct flame comes right along here, up this grass, and just climbs right up into these trees. Okay, this tree should be limbed, this grass should be mowed, and these needles should be raked under any keep tree. Okay, on the top, you can see some mulch. When we have a fire event, there's a lot of wind, and this mulch is right up against the house, and so embers are going to land in there, and it's going to blow and reach the home. And we have this tall grass too, right? That 0 to 5, that no vegetation, that's so that direct flame, when it's on the ground, it hits that no vegetation and stops, right? We want to give it that opportunity to stop and not go over and reach your home. Okay, and then this bottom picture here as well. Here we have a little tree growing under a bigger tree. It's a ladder fuel. This little tree underneath will never be a big, healthy tree. So it's a good opportunity to get rid of it, limb up this tree, and let this tree enjoy the space. Okay, on this page, this was a lot of just up against homes, right? Like here's a lot of landscaping right up against a home. We have this a soffit eave area. When vegetation burns, it's 2 to 3 times the height of whatever it is, right? So here we have this big bush, and it being 3 feet high, this thing could be 9, 12 feet high when it burns. And here's the soffit right here. Okay, again, 0 to 5, give that fire an opportunity to stop before it gets to your home. Just the same thing in all of these areas right here. A lot of radiant heat right here. Our houses are now called fuel type H in the wildland fire world. And then you have that, and then you have all these trees up against it. I wonder if there are any windows behind those trees. I'm willing to bet there is, and windows are our most vulnerable point of our homes for radiant heat. All right, again, trees planted right up next to the house. All right, we're not saying don't plant trees, just plant them back. Give your house 10, 15 feet. Okay, again, just to feel continuity on some of these pictures, it's a lot. Okay, so in this picture, these are pictures of decks, and the reason they're up there is, again, we have the grass going right to a deck, and you can see the lattice here. You can see lattice here. Lattice ignites easily. So if that grass goes right up to the lattice, ignites the lattice, and then the fire climbs right up those supports, the joists, and reaches your homes. Okay, same thing here. It doesn't have the long grass, but again, if there's anything right here, the embers will ignite it. Here we have vegetation growing under a deck. The deck joists are wood. Our supports are also wood. Same goes for storing things under your deck. It seems like it makes sense to store things under there, but again, embers get in there, ignite the things underneath there, and then ignite your deck, which will ignite your home. All right. So something else I wanted to mention is for you to look outside your house, look at your address. Okay. Has anyone ever told you that it's hard to find your house? Because if they have, it's probably hard for me to find it too in the dark when I'm driving a fire engine to your house. Can you see it? If not, you might want to think about changing your sign. All right. So the new WUI code Wildland Urban Interface Code requires signs and supports to be made of non-combustible material with 4-inch reflective letters on a contrasting background. Many of us have these right now. This was an initiative started in Genesee Foundation around 8-10 years ago. So many of us have these, okay? The numbers are great. Our problem now is the flammable post. So that's just another hurdle, but I really want to encourage everyone to get some reflective numbers for your home. And the reason we need them at your driveway is because everybody puts them in a different spot on your home and we don't know where to look. All right, the end of the driveway is the best. We want to be able to see it in bad weather, and we want to be able to see it if there's a smoke-filled day, right? It's like night out. Just make sure you check with your ARC rules. All right, so I'm the person that does the home assessments in the whole community, and I would love to do that for you. You receive a report with mitigation recommendations from the Colorado State Forestry Service, and you receive photographs. And again, they're just recommendations. I share them with you. I can't make you implement anything. It's your land. You own the data and the report. I don't share anything with insurance companies or the neighbors or the ARC. No one can call me and ask me about your report. Your report is not stored here at the fire station. It's stored off-site. It's a certificated program. So what that means is once we talk about recommendations and things with mitigation, and you do those things and you have me come back out, I can issue you a certificate of mitigation, good for 3 years, because mitigation never stops, right? What does that get you? You can share it with your insurance company if you so choose to show them the effort you're making. And it's also a really good selling point on your home. My contact information is on the screen. I will share it with you again at the end, so you do not have to copy it frantically. And it's also found on the fire website. The cost of an assessment is $100. This program is up and down the Front Range, and we all charge $100. The money goes to other programs associated with fire mitigation and other initiatives. All right, I'm going to turn it over to you, Brian.
Thanks, Dory. Hi, everyone. My name is Brian Mallett. I'm the Open Space Manager for Genesee Foundation, and I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing on open space and some of our priorities, and I'll also talk about roadside thinning. So some of you might not be aware, but I do an annual open space management plan where I lay out all the work that we're going to do for the year. And talk about a lot of the education and the reason behind it. And so for 2022, we have that one on our website there, geneseefoundation.org/community/open-space. And if you're not sure exactly where to find that, on the top, there's a search bar, and you can just put in open space management plan. And roughly what we're doing between is this, when we started doing these presentations, it was in 2021. So between 2021 and 2022, we have about 70 acres of grant funded forest restoration work. And I keep forgetting to change this. I said that the grant does not include roadside thinning. It now actually does. We've got grant funding to do roadside thinning. You can go to the next one, Dory.
Trying to.
Yeah, I know, it's okay. It takes a second. Dory's managing the PowerPoint, so there's just a little bit of a delay when she clicks to the next button, to the next slide. It just takes a second to show up is all.
Okay. Oh,
there we go. Thanks, Dory.
Yep.
So here's a pretty comprehensive, if maybe difficult to understand, map of what I've got going on in open space. On the right, that peach color, that's Plan Unit H. And on the left here, I outline the things that we have for the next couple of years going on. 24 acres of thinning in between Chokecherry Lane and Genesee Trail. So that's up in the north, those different colored shapes that will be contracted out. And then some work that we're going to be doing for roadside thinning. That's the red shapes there. And the purpose of that is to make our one and only egress route more safer right now. There's discussions on additional egress routes, but what we have right now is everybody has to go out to Genesee Ridge or Genesee Trail. And so you can see all those areas that I'm concentrating on. Everything that I work on it is on open space. It's Genesee Foundation owned property. Some of the areas we'll also be concentrating on the next couple of years is the western side of Genesee. And then after that, the middle of Genesee there. Again, all that is open space. Some of it has been treated in the past, but forests grow back and they grow back real fast. And so the red is roadside thinning, and then the yellow is the is also roadside thinning that we'll be doing in the next couple of years. And there's a portion of that in Plan Unit H. And if you want to see this in more detail, this is also on the Open Space Management Plan. So you can download that as a PDF and you can look at these maps. Okay, Dory, you can go to the next one. Maybe I'll start asking you to, I'll like plan a couple seconds early and I'll keep talking and then it'll switch perfectly. But I went to the next one. So some of our priorities, mitigating our evacuation route, as I mentioned, and then annually we try to complete between 40 and 50 acres of forest restoration and wildfire mitigation. Like I mentioned, it's been a lot of it's grant funded. And this is often in residents' quote unquote backyard. As you all know, the open space goes through everywhere in Genesee and it's oftentimes out your back window. And so it can change your view sometimes, and it changes by you drive. I mean, when you're going to be driving out in the next couple of years, you'll see a difference. And that's why we're doing this and why I do those open space management plans, to make everyone very well aware of what we're doing and the reason behind it. And for wildfire mitigation, I always say hope for the best, such as the Elephant Butte fire, which occurred here in Evergreen in 2020. And there were no structures lost, no lives lost. It was a relatively small fire. It was 50 acres, but it was in a very densely populated area. But we have to plan for the worst, such as the Cameron Peak fire and the Marshall fire. So those are two very different fires. The Cameron Peak burned hundreds of thousands of acres and burned a lot of structures, but it wasn't in a heavily dense area such as the Marshall fire, as everybody is aware of. So we have to plan for the worst. And a lot of folks will ask me, if it's going to burn, why should I do anything? There's a couple of reasons why you should. So Dory already talked about this emergency response. If they can, they are going to fight the fire. They're going to try and save your house if they possibly can. And it's your responsibility. It's our responsibility as non-firefighters, as residents that rely on them to make it safe for them to do their job, which means maybe removing some trees along the roadside, doing a better job at home hardening and defensible space so that they can protect your house. Second reason is for evacuation. So if you have a long driveway or if you have a private drive that's overgrown with flammable vegetation, you can potentially increase the safety of your evacuation routes, or give yourself more time to get out, or give your neighbor more time to get out in the event of a wildfire. And thirdly, you can prevent home ignition. Dory showed some photos at the beginning of the I think it was Waldo Canyon fire, where homes did not burn because they did defensible space. Okay, you can go to the next one, Dory. Thanks. So resident wildfire mitigation. So as I mentioned, priority for Genesee Foundation is major roadways, and we're only working on where we own Genesee Foundation property. The property owner is responsible for mitigating their own defensible space, even if it extends, onto open space. I think I've talked to some of you folks about this, and people have probably been through this process, but say you own only 0.25 acres, and that doesn't go out, 30 or 50 feet, which is your defensible space. So can you remove trees on open space? Yes, you can. We have a process for that. And in fact, I submitted a new policy update to the board and to the ARC, and that's in a comment period right now. It's on our website. and you could look at that. But basically, I'm trying to make that process easier and more accessible for residents. So is the ARC and so is the board, so that it's easier for you all to remove trees on your property and on open space as well. And that's the third point as well. You can go to the next one, Dory. So non-survivable roadways. This is the justification for roadside thinning. The CWPP pointed out a bunch of different places in Genesee that it called non-survivable roadways. What is that? It's a portion of the road adjacent to areas with predicted flame lengths greater than 8 feet under severe fire weather conditions. Dory talked about what fire weather conditions are, the 97th, 90th, and 60th percentile weather conditions. And red flag days, that doesn't have to be a 97th percentile weather condition, but it can be. Usually around here, it's generated based on the wind, but when you pair high wind gust with dry climate, that's when you get those severe fire weather conditions. And that flame length, so flame length is just referring to a piece of fuel that's either grass, bush, tree that's on fire. And generally, flame lengths can be 2 to 3 times the height of that fuel source. So if you have a 2-foot piece of grass on fire, and it's not just the one blade that's on fire, but if you isolate that, it's 2 feet. And so then you can imagine 4 to 6 foot flame lengths. And then if you also add in wind to that, so if the wind is blowing towards your house, or uphill or downhill, then that 4 to 6 foot flame length from that grass is going that much closer to your home, or that much further over the road that you need to drive through to get out of Genesee. So the second piece of this, drivers stopped or trapped on these roadways would have a low chance of surviving radiant heat, just means fire, energy from the fire, from fires of this intensity. And so Dory, you can go to the next one. The next one will show you a map. So you can see on the left, excuse me, just a sec. You can see on the left from the CWPP, they ran all these factors through a model and found all of these areas to be non-survivable roadways. So it's a lot. It's kind of what you might expect. There's a lot of vegetation along our roadsides. A lot of our private drives are pretty narrow. They're usually not more than 14 feet in length. And so you can imagine that could be easily overwhelmed by flame lengths if there's a bunch of trees or tall grasses along the side of the road. And so then to the right is where we zoom in to Plan Unit H. And there are some areas, again, as you'd expect in the southern part there, you see a lot of trees, and therefore you see a lot of red. And then along some of those private drives as well, again, it has to do with those narrowness of the private drives. You can go to the next one, Dory. So what are we trying to avoid? When I say plan for the worst, we're talking about the Marshall Fire, and then also the Paradise Fire, which had a slightly different, well, it had a different element to it. So in the picture in the bottom left, that's from the Paradise Fire in California, where folks were having to drive through fire. And there was a bunch of different reasons as to why. It had to do with what they were in, like the neighborhood they were in, the vegetation, and how fast the fire was moving. And I don't think it necessarily had to do with a lack of notification. It was just unpreparedness, I think, for that severe of a fire in that dense of an area. So folks were having to drive through fire. And then on the bottom right, that's emergency responders driving through fire, doing their job. We want to avoid that as best we possibly can. So doing roadside thinning is trying to mitigate that. You can go to the next one, Dory. So now we have some examples. This is a Montaigne private drive. And just keep in mind, most of Genesee looks like this. Anywhere west of Genesee probably looks like this. They have narrow drives, a lot of conifer, Idledale, a lot of places look like this. So not pointing anybody out, but just pointing some things out that we could do to make it better. So on the left and right, we have vegetation hanging over this narrow drive. And so you can easily imagine that if there's a fire there, we've got a lot of ladder fuels, a lot of ways for the fire. Fire always starts on the ground. A lot of ways for the fire to creep up into the treetops and then overwhelm that road and make it impassable. And what I usually say here in Genesee for these small roads, these narrow roads, is to have a minimum of a 15-foot box, a 15-foot box of non-flammable vegetation. That's the bare minimum so that we could assume that a car could get through. But if you think about that, the flame lengths where it can be 2 to 3 times 15 feet is just the bare minimum. So I also point out on the bottom right there that ladder fuels, there's a lot of that, and saplings usually burn first. So grass will usually burn first, and then saplings are next. As far as saplings are the kind of trees, saplings just mean young small trees. Saplings are the kind of trees that will burn first, and they're also pretty easy to get rid of. So if you get rid of small trees now, then you prevent them from becoming big trees later on. So removing a lot of these, limbing is also an option. So removing limbs on the tree so that you can get that 15 foot off of the drive. Sometimes though, if you were to start that project with a tree on your property, you'd see that once I remove 15 feet, there's really not much left of this tree, and I might as well just remove the whole thing. So I do think about that too when I do open space mitigation. I think I do limb trees for that purpose, and then I'll think if I limit this much, aesthetically, it's very unpleasing to have no limbs left on it, so I might as well just remove it. You can go to the next one, Dory. And so this is Montaigne Drive. You can see it's a lot wider. There's less trees on this bend here, and that's great. It's still going back to that rule where flame lengths can be 2 to 3 times. You could see how on the left or on the right that it could overwhelm a part of the road, and that still makes it unsafe. And so I show you on the left there, that's easily greater than or equal to 8-foot flame lengths right on the side of the road. And so a portion of this was on the CWPP non-survivable roadways. And I'd also say that CWPP model, it didn't find everything. Like if I were to go out and say, you know, I think that this would be 8-foot flame lengths as well, and this would, it doesn't find every single thing. It had a bunch of factors that it calculated and spit out that model. It's never exact. It's something to go by, something to start your plan with. And so you can see there's still some flammable vegetation hanging over the road. So even doing some, if you own some property along the main road, keeping in mind too, actually, the main road there's gonna be a lot more people having to go through there. And as we'll see later in the presentation, if we do have an evacuation, there's very likely to be a traffic jam because there's a lot of folks that are gonna be leaving at once. And you don't wanna be stuck in traffic when there's fire right along the roadside. You want to have that fire mitigated or at least dropped to the ground, so just in the grass, not on the treetops. And the way you do that is by removing a lot of ladder fuels and removing some of the trees that are nearest the road. And I think that's it, Dory. You can go to the next one. I think that's all mine. And so the next is Nancy. Did you want to take a crack at that, Becky?
Yeah, I'm gonna fill in because Nancy is not able to make it tonight.
Thanks,
Everyone, my name is Becky Smith. I'm with the Fire and Safety Committee. And I'm going to continue on this topic of non-survivable roadways for a second. Brian talked a lot about non-survivable roadways. He's responsible for trying to make the roads that go through open space survivable and clear those egress routes. But a lot of those non-survivable pockets are on private property. And so this picture is a private driveway within your neighborhood plan unit H. Even though those ponderosas look like they've been limbed up quite a bit, there's one of them there that, you know, I can't see where the pavement ends with the snow, but it looks like it's growing in the road. It's so close. And then that fir tree on the right side of the picture is hanging over several feet. So there's definitely some work that can be done on this roadway and roadways like it. On the next slide, Dory. So things you should consider if you want to try and make your driveway a little bit safer. Dory and Brian have covered a lot of these, you know, limbing up your trees, clearing trees away from the roadway, getting rid of ladder fuel. And Dory talked about the reflective house signs. I wanted to touch on that just a little bit more. Because I don't have one at my house. So I was just looking at this morning. The fire department, the Genesee Fire Rescue website has a link. You have to go like down into their menu 1 or 2 levels, but they have a link to a company that will sell these signs. And it's only about, the one I was looking at was only about $25. And it has your house number on both sides. Unless you're at the end of a road, you want your house number on both sides of the sign so that, you know, if anyone does miss your house for any reason, they can come back and they can see it. If they're going around a loop and it's smoky conditions, they'll see your sign with the headlights with reflective material that it's made out of. So check that out on the Genesee Fire District website. The next slide, please. All right, so let's pull back a little bit, and instead of talking about just non-survivable roadways, let's just talk about getting out of Genesee. These graphics are from the CWPP. They ran a couple different simulations to see how long it would take folks to get out of Genesee. The graphic on the left assumed that every household would leave at the same time, but only with 1 car. And I think the folks on the west and south side, it takes about 2 hours, a little more than 2 hours to get out of Genesee. If everyone takes 2 cars, just as you might guess, it takes twice as long. Could take more than 4 hours for everyone to get out. And everyone leaving at once is not that unrealistic. If we don't have a lot of notice, if a fire starts near Genesee, it could be everyone pretty much leaving at once. So that's not an unrealistic scenario. It also does not take into account the fact that you're going to be panicked. There's going to be a lot of adrenaline. Folks are going to have impaired judgment. There may be accidents as a result of that. It doesn't take into account low visibility and poor driving conditions due to the fire. So this is really is a concern. As we continue to go through this presentation and talk about making your evacuation plan, please plan on taking 1 car. You'll get out of the neighborhood faster, and you'll make sure everyone else in the neighborhood has a better chance of getting out. Next slide, please, Dory. So again, these egress challenges are not just for us getting out, but also for emergency response to get into the neighborhood. We've talked about non-survivable roadways. We just talked about the roadway congestion. And it's been mentioned as well that even though, you know, over the years, we've looked at different egress routes, getting a second way out of the neighborhood, and we continue to look at it for the near future, for the foreseeable future, we only have the exit to the north, the 2 exits out to I-70. And because Genesee Vista and Genesee Ridge, those intersections are so close together, the CWPP actually considers that a pinch point. That's only 1 egress. So for most of us, including Plan Unit H, we really only have 1 exit. Next slide, please. It is all the more important that you have a plan so that you can get out as fast as you can. So let's talk about how you develop your evacuation plan. First of all, you want to know when a fire has started nearby. And so sign up for Code Red notifications, the reverse 911. Jefferson County uses Code Red, and you can sign up on your911.net as shown there on the slide. It's my understanding that landlines are automatically registered, but if you have a cell phone, if you want to get your email registered, you have to go to that website and opt in. You also, if you have babysitters or caretakers or people who are at your house regularly, make sure that they are signed up as well so that they get the same notifications if you're out of the house. You want to have an emergency plan. You want to talk to your kids about it. You want them to know what they have to do if you have to get out of the house quickly. Talk about how you're going to get your pets out of the house. We're going to talk about having a go bag on a few of on the next slide here. But also talk to your neighbors and let them know if you're out of the house on a regular basis, whether you work or you travel, Let people know that you have caretakers in your house. Maybe you have elderly in your house that might need help getting out. So talk to your neighbors and be sure that everyone is prepared to help each other. Next slide, please, Dory. So let's talk about what you do to have a go bag and be ready to go at a moment's notice. This checklist was put together by Rotary Wildfire Ready of Evergreen. This and many more, they've developed a lot of brochures and helpful documents. Their website is rotarywildfireready.com. And this talks about what you should have in your go bag. Some of these things you can't just put in a bag and leave. You know, the prescription medicines are on here. If you have a 3-month supply and you can keep your extra in your go bag instead of the closet, do that. But if you don't have that much and you can't keep it in your go bag, things like that, have another checklist on top of your go bag so that you're not looking and trying to remember at the last minute all these little things that you have to grab, like a phone charger or your prescription medications. Have that checklist on your go bag so that you can grab your bag and you know exactly what you have to grab to get out of the house. Next slide, please, Dory. You know, I was also going to mention that not only are these available on the website, but the link to these is on the Genesee Foundation website. It's on the Genesee Fire and Rescue website, and I think hard copies are available in the Vista Clubhouse. So you could swing by there and just grab one of these. All right, so this is page 2. This is the back side of this checklist. It talks about what you should wear. Don't wear synthetics. Wear all cotton, 100% wool. Cover all of your skin. Have leather gloves, long sleeves, heavy boots, as well as a hat and your N95 mask. Stick a couple of those in your go bag so that you're ready to go. And then have these clothes, you know, by your go bag if you can, so that you just go to one location in the house, change clothes, get out of the house. In the middle of the checklist there's some things you can do if you have time. Dory mentioned pulling your cushions in from the house, and there's some other suggestions here. Again, this is only if there's a pre-evacuation notice and you have some time. Otherwise, don't worry about it, just leave and take one car. And then at the bottom of this, it has some suggested resources for notification for up-to-date information if there's an active fire in the area. I've heard it said that My Mountain Town is the best one of these. So they've got a Twitter feed, a Facebook site, and their website. So check all of those out, but definitely check out mymountaintown.com. Okay, next slide. So the reason we're doing these presentations is to make you aware of what the CWPP says are the risks for Genesee, and specifically for Plan Unit H. And if you're like a lot of folks who've had their presentations already, you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed right now because it's a lot. There's a lot to do. We are in a high risk area, but hopefully we're also giving you a lot of resources and ideas of things you can do tomorrow afternoon even, or this weekend, and places you can go to get more information. One of the other things we want to encourage you to do is to schedule a neighborhood walk with Brian and Dory. So this is an opportunity for you to meet with them in person. They'll come out to your street and walk with you. It's your chance to talk about that overlapping defensible space that you have with your neighbor, or a patch of trees that you're concerned about, just specific conditions on your street. And it's just a chance to talk with them and pick their brains. Next slide, please. It's also an opportunity for you to have those conversations with your neighbor about your situation and about how you can help each other, because that's not the sort of thing you normally talk about on a normal conversation when you're having dinner together or whatever. So it's a good chance to talk about these sort of oddball subjects. So what we need people to do are to step forward. If you're interested and you want to do something about your neighborhood, please send an email to the Fire and Safety Committee at that email address on the screen. We'll coordinate with Brian and Dory's schedules, and we'll get something set up I know right now we have a few open slots early in May. And if you're interested in those, please send us an email right away. This busy season is coming up for both of them. And so the sooner the better that we get this scheduled. I wanted to mention one of the other benefits of having this neighborhood walk is just a bonding opportunity with your neighbors. We've had streets do this neighborhood walk, and they end up the next couple of weekends, they get together and they help folks limb up trees and rake needles. So it's, and you know, you can see this tree here on the slide, a beautiful old tree, but by now you know what the problems are. You can recognize the tall grass and the limbs that need to be limbed up and removed to get rid of ladder fuels. So that's the sort of thing that you can help each other out with. And finally, I have Dory's contact information on here. The neighborhood walk is a sort of a general conversation, but what she will do for you is specific to your house, and she will cover all the vents in your house, and she will look at the gaps under your garage door, and she'll let you know, just about everything that you can do to make your house as safe as possible. Next slide, please. So again, you don't have to write all these down. I think Dory is going to have all of this information through a link in the chat, but there is a lot of information out there. So these are some of the first places I would recommend that you check out if you want to learn more. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Dory.
Thank you, Becky. All right. She is correct. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I will put a link in the chat box. Before I do that, what I would like to ask everyone to do for me is to take a 6-question poll. It will appear on your screen, and what it's about is about this presentation. And it just gives us an idea if there's other things that we should be covering with you that we're not. If you wouldn't mind filling that out, it'll probably take you about 2 minutes to do. I just launched it. Like the first one says, my expectations for this workshop were met. So that's the first question. I believe it has 6. If you wouldn't mind filling that out, I'm going to get the link to share with you. Thank you for those of you that are filling it out. I really appreciate it. Again, this is just information for us. And if we have not covered a topic that you think that we should, put something about it in the chat box. Let us know. We talk about a lot of things. Maybe you don't want us to talk about anything else, but please let us know if there's something else that you would like to hear. So I will leave the poll going for about another minute. Again, after the poll, we will do our Q&A. I have a couple of things I want to bring up, but that's it. About 30 more seconds. All right, I'm going to officially end the poll. Thank you for participating. I think it makes me. Interesting. It's not asking me to record it. Well, oh, there we go. All right. Here we go. So before we move on to Q&A, I just want to say, I hope you can join Genesee Fire Rescue on April 14. We are having an hour presentation with us and the Wildfire Research, otherwise known as WIRE. We will be sharing the results from the rapid assessments that I did back in June. I walked every entire street in our district and did a rapid assessment of your property. And also, if you filled out the the household survey, the results and analysis of that will also be shared, and there will also be a Q&A of that. So I do want to remind you of that. It will be next Thursday, April 14 at 6 p.m. Also, if Genesee Foundation does have a spot on their website for the reflective signs. So please check that out as well. It's probably easier to get to and all of those things, but again, it is on our website as well. And so I just wanted to let you know that. So, all right, Chris, I'll be quiet now. And the link is in the chat, and I'll put it in there again before we are done. So
thank you so much, Dorian.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. I'm Chris Carlasco, and I'm another volunteer on the Fire and Safety Committee. And so I'll be going through some of the questions that you've raised tonight. And we've got some great questions from some of our previous presentations that we can go over as well. So starting it off, Lynn Haas came up with a couple of questions. And number one is, we've got wooden fences around some of our homes and for various aspects. And Dory, when you're doing your assessment, what do you tell people to do about those wooden fences?
And I'm going to start off by saying right now, those wooden fences were a huge problem in the Marshall Fire. And this is why. It's because of all of the collection of the things at the bottom of the fences. Mitigation wise, they're going to recommend that where your fence touches any part of your home, that it's replaced with metal. So by breaking up that fuel continuity, again, that wood, it's like by putting in a metal gate, removing it, replacing it with metal. And some people are like, I'm not doing that. Okay, that's fair. The other thing is you've got to keep those areas clean. The thing is you have to, again, mitigate 5 feet around it and with non-combustible materials. So I know fences are expensive, but that's the mitigation recommendation. There you go.
Got you, right. And I guess, Dory, another question from Lynn is in times of an evacuation, what are the plans like for traffic control? How do our emergency responders handle it when we get that notice that we all need to evacuate?
Well, when that happens, law enforcement are contacted, and until they're in place, yes, the fire department does help. And actually, that is something we are working on with Jefferson County. They have their own plan for our area. And so I can't speak to that plan, but I know that we have reached out to them to create that plan. And so I just want to reiterate that everyone not wait for us to come and knock on your door. It's going to take a while for all of those things to start. The time between the first smell of smoke and when an evacuation order is issued, that could be anywhere from 20 minutes to, an hour. So, you don't have to be told to go. And again, we're hoping that law enforcement's in place. I can't speak for them. We'll be fighting fire. We'll be helping as much as we can. So.
That is something that the Fire and Safety Committee we've got several work groups, and we are looking at things that maybe the foundation can put out more information in the future to help educate people and make you a little bit more aware of what the overall framework for some of these plans might look like. the basic, I hear Jason say this time and time again, right? The basic thing is follow the route you're most familiar with when you're evacuating.
Absolutely.
Lynn has another question about limbing up trees, Brian, and he's asking about if he limbs them up, but he's talking about open space. Will the foundation come and take them away? That probably ties into a couple of other questions, like if your defensible space goes off into open space. You mentioned a tree removal policy, but maybe kind of speak to it a little more, give a little more detail about some of those things.
Yeah, so we have our slash pickup coming the first week of June, and a big reason why we do that is because a lot of folks ask about that, whether it's private property or open space. We don't have the capacity. It takes a whole week to do that, so we don't have the capacity to do one-offs like that. And the fire department, Dory, has added another event this year. It's going to be a slash drop off at the fire station in July. So we have two, and then also the county regularly does their slash drop off, and they're going to be ramping it up. And Dory's talking to them about getting a slash drop off that will be closer to Genesee. So everybody recognizes that slash is an issue when we're telling you do fire mitigation. The next question, okay, what do I do with the slash? I have that same problem when we're trying to mitigate 40 to 50 acres of open space as well. And so for that reason, we have 1,200 acres of open space. We have a lot of priorities. I can't go and get everybody slash, even if it is on open space. And so then what Chris was alluding to is, okay, folks want to remove some limbs on open space, and I want you to do that. And the board and the ARC have recognized that there's been an increased request in that as well. And so we put together a formal policy for folks to do that. And that's also in the policy comment period. And I think it'll be up in maybe 2 weeks. So I presented that to the board, and the board voted on it. And then there's a 28-day comment period for everybody in the neighborhood to look at it. And then the board will vote on it again. What is it? It's just a policy that says if folks want to remove limbs or mow grass on open space, to just contact me. And I think we're going to say there's a form, but there's also a waiver because you're doing that work on property that's not yours. And you might be using, a pole saw or something sharp like that. But we want to make it very doable for folks. So that will be a policy soon. And then there's also, I guess I don't really, were you talking about going into the details of the new tree removal update too, Chris?
Well, I was just thinking just what you were talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, if it's on open space, we want it to happen. But just be aware there's a policy. You really should give Brian a call, talk to him, and make sure you're actually, where your property boundary is. So you actually are doing it on your property and not your neighbor's property and all of that.
That's a big one. Yeah.
Yeah. And Brian, we're talking about this now a lot more than we ever used to. What about mowing?
Yeah. So as I talked about in my presentation, tall grasses can be an issue if it's right along the road. And so as we were doing this last year, these presentations, and we also did walkthroughs last year, folks would ask us, like, can we go ahead and do that? And yeah, I want people to do that. And so that's also the reason for the policy. Generally, what I think would be best is mowing grasses down to 4 inches within 5 to 10 feet of the road. It depends on how wide the road is. But again, if you got that 14-foot road, mowing it out further, you don't have to mow forever. It doesn't have to be 100 feet out. You get diminishing returns there, really just 5 to 10 feet within the road, and you'll get your maximum effect there for protecting the egress.
Thanks. That's great. Dory, a number of people in past presentations have mentioned, gee, I've got a fire hydrant right by my house. So does that mean I'm safer?
No, it doesn't. And for a structure fire, that's a great thing. But on a wildfire, we do not tether ourselves to a fire hydrant. It would be a really rare situation. because that did happen in the Marshall Fire. So what we do is we need to be able to move because the fire moves. And so what happens is we get a tender apparatus from another district like Foothills. And they go to a part of the neighborhood that is safe, and they hook up to a hydrant and they fill their tenders, and then they bring their tender full of water to us, which we replenish our water supply so that we can continue to fight the fire on the move as needed. So that's not going to be, the best thing in a wildfire. So sorry.
If we are evacuating, you mentioned pulling pillows and things off the decks.
Yep.
And Lynn mentioned has a good question. What about those propane tanks?
Yeah, absolutely. So with the propane tanks, if you have time, put them in your driveway so that we can see them. All right, so things like that, just put them in your driveway.
How do we know if it's a red flag day?
You can watch your favorite morning news show. You can go to the Jefferson County website. They'll tell you. There's a number of the weather websites will tell you as well. I try and post it on Nextdoor when I find out. That's how you can do it.
I've been noticing that the evening news has been so much better now about putting the regions that will have red flag warnings out on them.
I did post a red flag warning, I believe, last week, and then 10 minutes, because Jefferson County had issued it, but like 10 minutes later, they said, no, they'd made a mistake. I think everyone's just really heightened right now. It's kind of dry, and we've had some red flag days, but that one was a mistake. And so I will always repost and say it was a mistake. And then I'll always put the date in there, because I know on Nextdoor people repost things from the past. So just pay attention to the date, listen to your favorite weather station or whatever, and it'll be posted.
We put up a number of maps of Genesee and of this particular plan unit. Are there any safe spaces in Genesee?
Nope, there was none found. We don't have any spaces within Genesee large enough to accommodate the number of people we have that live here. The entire district was looked at and there were none found. So you need to evacuate, and we will be giving educational things about sheltering in place and those kind of things. But right now we do not have a place of last refuge.
So if we are getting together and doing a lot of this spring work, Brian, when do we think the next grant might be? The grant cycle, you talked about work you're doing on grants. Is there anything coming up that would help us?
Yeah, so the only way individual homeowners with less than 50 acres of property, which is most folks in Genesee, the only way individual folks can get grant funding to do wildfire mitigation is through an entity like Genesee Foundation. So we apply to this Colorado State Forest Service. They regularly have funding for forest restoration and wildfire mitigation. In the past, we've applied for defensible space projects, and we've gotten those. Last year we applied and we did not get it. There's messaging sent out basically saying that these one-off D-space, which means you have a home on Montaigne Drive and then you've got a home on Foothills Drive, things that are not connected, that don't have strategic value in completing them, they're less likely to be funded. So we are going to apply for that same grant funding again. But we're going to try to do it in a more strategic way, the way they want it to be done, which is to say getting groups of homes that are contiguous, connected together, that want to do defensible space projects. Not exactly sure how we're going to go about that yet. We're going to use a lot of the data we gathered last year. So we had, I think, 40 to 45 folks that wanted to participate last year. So we'll start with the folks that we've already discussed this with, and then we'll start to get that rolling and see if we can get more contiguous properties together. But as it is right now, there's really no funding for individuals to do those admittedly very expensive wildfire mitigation projects. So all the trees that Dory would mention when she does on her home assessment, it can rack up. And then also if we do get that funding for D-space, and say your one and your 3 or 4 neighbors are also part of it, you would have to abide by the defensible space that Dory would come out and mark and say, you got to remove all these trees. And if you didn't want to remove the 1 or 2, then that would botch the whole thing. You wouldn't get the funding, nor would, say, the contiguous homeowners as well. So it's kind of a tricky thing that we have to figure out. But it's also, defensible space is something that we need to start thinking more seriously about.
Yeah. Brian, do you know of any companies that you could recommend for home hardening or some of this dispensable space work?
Yeah, the home hardening one I think is tricky, and Dory might have an opinion about that. For the D space, yeah, there's a lot of folks that do tree removal. When folks ask me, there's a couple companies that do work up here regularly, and when it comes to recommendations, I only recommend companies that I've actually worked with, that I've actually hired and have done a great job. And so there's 2 of those. If you want those, just send me an email or call me. I put my contact info at the bottom.
I might have linked one of them to the information I share, Brian, just so you know.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and Dory, have you got any companies yet that you know of?
For the home hardening, no, that's really tough.
Yeah.
You know, as far as 0 to 5, you have to really tell your landscaper what you want. And I've done that, and my landscaper was able to do what I wanted. I was pretty specific about it. So I went with rock in my space and boulders. So, you know, it wasn't terribly hard. But the other thing was, you know, I went through the ARC because you have to do that when you change the rock and things. So just so you know that, but you know, it's a lot like xeriscaping. And as far as fixing vents and those kind of things, I have not found anyone that specializes in that. So, you know, if you know a handyman, handy person, you know, share their name. So
one of the other points that has been on the news a lot lately, especially after the Marshall Fire, is about insurance.
Mhm.
So I know that the recommendations are to take a good hard look at your level of insurance, and with this level of inflation, with the home prices we're seeing, construction prices are going up as well. So definitely see if you can take a little time, get with your insurance agent, make sure you're not underinsured. And there have been a couple of seminars that have been offered lately, a Zoom call here or there, that have talked about reviewing your insurance policy to make sure your riders take care of things like debris removal, and that if we are unfortunate and have to do a cleanup, that you've got the coverages that will protect you on that.
don't forget to get those inventory pictures updated. When you're taking pictures inside your home, open the cabinets, open the drawers when you take those pictures. So.
And you can store a lot of that information in the cloud these days. And some of the larger investment companies will offer you some data storage for free that, for example, our family has been able to take advantage of and put a lot of those videos we took when we walked around the house and put that up in the cloud. Otherwise, some of the other storage entities, you know, fairly small per month charges. That's about it, Dory.
All right. So if you look in the chat box, I have placed the link. If you click on that link, there's going to be a lot of information on there, how to contact us. I believe I've put some tree contractor information on there. I've put some just other things. Go to the fire website and look at under wildfire. There's some really good, and on the foundation, there's some really good links about insurance, about many of the things we've talked about. I'd love to come to your home and do an assessment. I just need you to know that that's not the only thing I do. I am booked out till July. Step forward, have that walk. It is pretty informal, but a lot of fun. So we want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. We hope to see you soon. So have a great night.